All right, we're recording.
Good evening, and welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting for tonight, August the 4th, 2022. Welcome everyone, and first order of business tonight will be our public hearings. And the first public hearing will be amendment to section 405.255 accessory structures ADM-123. Mr. Burks?
As a preliminary matter for this public hearing, I'll ask for the publication notice.
In the Warren County record be made part of the record by reference, the city comprehensive plan and city ordinance be made part of the record by reference, and the planning and zoning officer report be made part of the record by reference. The section 405.255 accessory buildings and structure, section A, number 1, subsection B, yards and area requirements. Detached accessory buildings may be located in the rear yard, but they shall not occupy or exceed more than, the old ordinance was 30% of the rear yard area. The change will be 50% of the square footage of the primary building, except as otherwise regulated in this chapter. That's going to be the change. Right. Do you have any questions for me?
I guess I'm sorry. Never mind. I'm fine.
Sure.
Yep.
So basically, the only change is just the number, 30 to 50?
Yeah, it was 30% of the
Property.
of the yard.
Yeah.
Rear
I mean,
yard.
That's what you're changing on. That's what we're changing on.
Yeah, now it'd be 50%
Right.
of the primary building. That's the changes.
What was the thought process and what precipitated this?
Pardon me?
What was the thought process and what precipitated this change?
On that,
Well, I would think that some of the houses have pretty small backyards, and 30% wouldn't give you even enough room to put a shed.
Well, it's not so much that. There are some yards, especially in subdivisions, that had a very large backyard. And backyard is defined as, in our code, I don't know exactly what the code says, but it's defined as a backyard. Well, 30% of the backyard in a subdivision, we could put up a 30 by 40 pole barn. And if it's a 2-story house, can't be any taller than that, so you got a 30 by 40 pole barn with 12-foot ceilings in it in the middle of a subdivision. That was the thought process, is 50% of the primary structure rather than going by the backyard. So that if you have a bigger subdivision that had huge backyards, the sky is really the limit on the size of the building you can put up.
Oh, so I did misread that. So this is more restrictive.
This is restricting to a smaller building in a subdivision or into residential areas. Because it used to be 30% of a backyard, so you could have a very large, especially like a cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
you know, a cul-de-sac lot, they got a huge backyard, you could have a pretty large size accessory structure on that, on the 30% rule. So now we'd like to change it to 50% of the primary structure.
But I want to, as an example though, I do live in a in a neighborhood. I have a larger backyard. My home is 1,600 square foot, which would limit me to 800 square foot. So basically 20 by 4, I couldn't even put an additional 2-car garage.
So you've got to remember, accessory structure is anything detached from the primary
Correct.
building.
Correct.
So if you would extend your garage, that wouldn't be an accessory structure.
I understand a standalone
Yeah.
2-car garage would not be, I couldn't get one. I guess, were there complaints about this? I'm just looking for what precipitated the...
Yes, there are a couple very specific locations where this happened, and there was a lot of pushback from the people in the subdivisions, which brought this on.
Did those subdivisions not have any ordinances in places themselves to keep that from happening?
No.
Those are covenants.
So we're
Yeah,
solving
covenants.
for a small percentage of issue are you anticipating a bigger problem?
Again, I would go back to like the cul-de-sac lots that have a very small front yard and a very large backyard, and then that's why we kind of went to the square footage of the primary building rather than a rear yard. I could see it becoming issues in some of the future subdivisions, but again, I don't the way that the subdivisions are laid out now, I think it's going to be more of an issue on the cul-de-sac lots more than a regular backyard.
But this could also impact, there's a residence at the end of Lakeview Street that sits on 7 acres, but it's got about 1,000 square foot house.
Do you know what that's zoned?
I do not.
Okay, because I think the zoning is different for ag
It's used residential. I don't know how it is.
I think it could be zoned, if it's zoned ag, that the sizes are different for ag, and it says it in our code. We can look that up if you'd like. But I don't know what that one's zoned. I could look that up too.
Seems like
I
that's
think John's point,
Oh, go ahead. Who's there?
well, this is Scott Costello.
Go ahead, Mr. Costello.
I think John's point is a good one. There are definitely home sites in the city limits that are an acre or larger. We've got some large lot subdivisions where homes are on 1, 2, 3 acres or better. And then there's other home sites like the one Mr. Cornell mentioned, and I can think of a handful of others that are in the city limits that are on fairly large parcels of land. So, I don't think all of them are zoned ag. I think a number of them. I know some of the large lot subdivisions are definitely zoned R1. So it seems to me like solving a problem, which I understand, if you're in a subdivision of homes that are fairly close together, and now all of a sudden you've got a 2-story structure visible from the street that's behind a home that is unattractive. I don't think it's fair, however, to restrict homes on larger lots to solve that problem.
And there is a solution. Currently, my dream of a 2-car detached garage isn't possible in my subdivision because of the covenants of the subdivision. So this could be addressed by these subdivisions by changing their bylaws and their restrictions and their covenants, as opposed to us changing an ordinance to restrict it. Again, just my thoughts on it.
Any other conversation?
I did look up that property that you were asking about at the end of Lakeview. That's R2, so this would apply to that,
Thank you.
just for reference.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak on that behalf tonight? If not, we'll close that public hearing and then open it back up at the regular meeting. Our next public hearing will be the Walton project, site plan -157. Mr. Burks?
As a preliminary matter for this public hearing, I'll ask that publication notice published in the Warren County Record be made part of the record by reference. The city comprehensive plan and the city ordinances be made part of the record by reference. And the planning and zoning officer report be made part of the record by reference. TGI Properties LLC has applied for a site plan for a 0.91 acre portion of a 4.96 acre area of land on the east side of Highway 47 north of Walton Street. The site plan is a request to allow an 8-bay commercial building unit with a total of 10,400 square feet of space for a dispatch center, general service, and a repair establishment. The proposal 35 parking spaces and 2 ADA spaces will be located on the north, south, and east side of the building and meet city code. The proposal seeks to provide landscaping on the site to comply with city code. The landscaping requirements with 5 parking area trees, 9 street trees, and 61 foundation shrubs. There are currently commercial use on the north and west side of the proposed unit, and no modifications are proposed to the existing shopping center to the north. Staff has reviewed the request for the site plan approval. All items and notices are required by state and local law, has been provided and completed. Bart Carmen's here from Lewis and Beatty to speak on this project.
Mr. Burks? Mr. Corman, state your name first, record, please.
For the record, Bart Corman, Lewis and Beatty.
Thank you.
So this is behind the old Kroger.
If you guys remember, about almost a year ago, we looked at some multifamily there. With the reception that we got, we withdrew that so that we could come back with something different. This is a commercial dispatch, general service, and repair establishment. So basically, it's set up for plumbers, electricians, HVAC repair to have a place that they can pull in and out of there, have something centrally located in town, but do most of their work off-site. So that's what we've come back with. I think it fits really well. We've limited our street cuts to 3 in that location. Put some parking there. Met all the shrubs and tree requirements, and answer any questions anybody may have.
Art, would this be, so is this going to be developed and used as rental for these different contractors, correct?
They'll be available for lease, yeah. It's a lease scenario.
Okay.
They're not planning on selling this part off. It's going to be part of the whole tract, and they'll lease those spaces just like they lease the commercial in the front for retail.
When you talk about dispatch,
So like you know, if you need a plumber, that's what they do. They dispatch the plumber out from that location.
Thank you.
And they have supplies there, so they wouldn't have to go to the store every time they needed some fittings or something. That's the type of scenario we're looking at.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions at this time? Thank you, Bart. Anybody else want to speak on this tonight? If not, we'll close that public hearing and open up our final public hearing for this evening, and that'll be the Oak Acres Villas Conditional Use Permit 86 and Site Plan -158. Mr. Burks.
As a preliminary matter for this public hearing, I will ask that the publication notice published in the Warren County Record be made part of the record by reference. The city comprehensive plan and the city's ordinances be made part of the record by reference. The planning and zoning officer report be made part of the record by reference. Wolfe Family Trust has submitted an application for a conditional use permit and a site plan approval for 1.22 acres on the west side of Warrenton Village Drive, north of Wolfe Road. The conditional use permit and site plan is to allow a proposed two quadplex and one duplex to be built on the site for multifamily housing. The site plan shows a 5,400 square foot proposed quadplex on lot 1A and 1B, and a 1,800 square foot proposed duplex on lot 1C. The site plan depicts sidewalks, landscape, cluster mailbox, and parking stalls along the new stormwater detention pond on the south side of the development. The site will be served by existing street, and the existing street serves similar land use in the area and have been designed to accommodate the proposed intensity of the land. The subject site is directly but R3 high-density single-family properties to the east and C3 highway commercial to the north and west. A single-family resident exists to the east of the east side of Warrenton Village Drive, and multifamily housing units exist at the end of Warrenton Village Drive to the north. There are 2 driveway spaces per quadplex for a total of 16, 5 spaces for the duplex unit, and 2 spaces for a mailbox unit, which shows a total of 23 spaces for the development. Staff has reviewed the proposed conditional use permit and site plan and found that the proposal is consistent with Chapter 410, the subdivision regulation of Warrenton Municipal Code. And Bart is here to speak on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Burks. Mr. Corman, once again.
For the record, Bart Corman, Lewis Beatty. I also have Mr. Clifton Wolfe here as the applicant to answer any questions you may have. Mr. Burks explained it pretty well, but it's right there off of Wolfe Road on Warrenton Village Drive, which is the drive and entrance to Warrenton Senior Village there. We're putting 2 quadplexes and a duplex on the east side of that, a storm drainage basin on the south side. We're at the bottom of the hill. Got a few extra parking spaces, which I know is always a concern here, so we added those. We've got our mailbox unit, our trees, and our shrubs, and I'll answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Mr. Corman. Anyone else would like to speak tonight? Mr. Wolfe, Keep your posse calm down back there, though. State your name for the record, sir.
My name is Clifton Wolfe. I live at 434 Highway U. It's the last house in the city limits of Warrenton. And I'm sure that you're wondering why I had that ground changed to commercial when I was wanting to build senior citizen housing. And I would like to explain that to you. The St. Clair of Assisi Catholic Charity was looking for 3 acres of commercial property. We had commercial property for sale, so I contacted them. They came out to look at the ground and said that they thought it would be okay for what they wanted it for. When I asked them what they wanted it for, when I asked them what they were going to do with the 3 acres, they said they wanted to build low-income senior citizen housing. It was my opinion that they could do this in the R3 zoning. This was mentioned to them, and I also had R3 zone property, and it wouldn't be as costly. They said that they had thought the same thing until they had talked to the city zoning officer. They indicated that the zoning officer had told them that they could build the multifamily housing in R3, but if it was to be rented, it had to be commercial. I thought that they had misunderstood the zoning officer. So before selling the property, I went down and talked to the zoning officer. Same answer. You can build it in R3, but if it is to be rented, it must be commercial. They bought the commercial property, built 19 senior citizen apartments, and before the apartments was completed, they were rented full with a year-long waiting list. After a short period of time, we were approached by the charity to see if we were interested in building more senior citizen housing in conjunction with them. We were very interested. So we began working on the details. The first thing was to check with the zoning officer. The former zoning officer had been replaced by a new zoning officer, but we got the same answer. You can build multifamily housing, but if it is to be rented, it must be commercial. My daughter was a school teacher and also on the zoning board. So I said to her, Teresa, what is your interpretation of R3 zoning regulation? She replied that she understood it the same way I did. So then I said, well, what's the problem? Her reply was, I'm on the zoning board, I'm not the zoning officer. It was obvious to me that we were going to have the ground rezoned. I had my daughter to check at the next scheduled zoning meeting, one that we weren't involved in, but they were having a meeting. And she called me the next day and said, Dad, you're going to need to rezone. So I applied for commercial zoning. Later at the next board meeting, like this one, where you come in and get yes or no. Later at the next board meeting, when the meeting started, the board president opened the meeting by saying, we don't understand why you're here. My reply was to get the zoning changed to commercial so we can build senior citizen housing in conjunction with the Catholic charity. My reply was, the zoning officer position is, his reply was, the zoning officer position is now vacant. Secondly, so we hired an independent engineering firm to oversee these applications. They have concluded that they see no problem with commercial zoning, but they can build senior citizen housing in R3 zoning, and they can rent it. My reply was, that's what I've been trying to tell you for the last 2 years. They then wanted to know if I wanted to continue with the zoning change. We now had 3 zoning officers' opinions on what you could or couldn't do in R3. So 2 had said no, 1 had said yes. So I went with the 2 and said yes, we want to continue. By zoning commercial, we could build to meet whoever was right. Back then in the R3 zoning, if you could build anything underneath the zoning that you were applying for. So commercial, we could build the senior citizen housing. After this meeting, I contacted the Catholic charity, and they had decided to build somewhere else. This housing request before you now is not. This housing request before you now is not federal senior citizen housing, but it is built with old folks in mind, no steps and etc. So that's the reason that it's zoned commercial. I think it was a mistake, not on my part. This is the opening statement that I'd like to make. This is my second attempt to get housing on this ground, aimed towards housing designed for senior citizens. The first attempt would have been, in my opinion, provide a much better service to seniors than the city of Walton. But misinformation from the city personnel, misinformation from the city prevented it from happening. This attempt will include 1.22 acres across the street from my house. Each unit will have 1,033 square feet per unit, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with a walk-in shower, no tub to step over, laundry room, walk-in pantry, rear covered patio, and 1-car garage with no steps. This is subject to change made by the city or ourselves. The neighbor to the north is St. Clair of Assisi Senior Village. It was developed by St. Joachim and is currently operated by Cardinal Ritter Senior Services and was built by the Banzi development. There are 19 living units in 5 buildings there. Excuse me. 4 fourplexes and 1 triplex. There is also a community building for offices, kitchen, and meeting room. We built a road across. We built a road about 45 feet behind my back door, across R3 ground, to get to this complex. We and St. Joachim's and Ann were erroneously told by the city zoning officer that we could build the housing, but if it was to be rented, it had to be commercial. This housing is dedicated to people over 62 years of age, and I'm 88, so I understand people over 62. I passed that a long time ago. This housing is dedicated to people over 62 years of age and with a limited income. Rent begins around $600 a month and gets smaller for lower income residents. All units remain full, and it is normally a year or longer wait before you can get in. Currently, there is 1 couple. The other 18 units were occupied by senior citizen females. To the south of this proposed housing complex is a 14-unit adult care center operated by Bristol Manor Company out of Sedalia. Most housing being built in Warrenton now appears to be in the seniors, in the multifamily. There is apparently no minimum of the size of apartments in future PDUs or PUDs. And I think that is great. Everybody doesn't need 1,200 square feet. But when you compare it to the 1,200 square feet for single family homes, maybe the table is slanted towards multifamily houses. People living in these PDUs and $200,000 single family homes are great people, but are capable of managing without assistance. I am more concerned for the folks who haven't been as lucky as myself and others. I was born in a cotton patch in Clay County, Arkansas in 1934. I know all about substandard housing. Thank you. If you have any questions.
I have any questions at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. You had me at your daughter. Thanks for your time, sir. All right.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. With that, we'll close our public hearings. If no one else has any questions, we'll open that back up in a little bit. Then we'll go to our public comments. Do we have any public comments? I have the Nerdosh LLC final plat subdivision 102.
Want me?
Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and Neardosh LLC has submitted an application for a final plat for a 10.79 acre of land on the west side of Highway 47 north of Warrior Avenue. Additionally, the final plat is consistent with the preliminary plat previously approved for the subject site by the City of Warrenton Board of Aldermen on February 12, 2022 with bill number 12-22. Completion of escrow guarantees, installation of public improvements to the property proposed is required and will be submitted to the city prior to signing the final plat. Preliminary stormwater indicates stormwater is handled through the existing detention facility. Staff has reviewed the proposed final plat and found the proposal is consistent with Chapter 410 of Subdivision Regulation of Warrenton Municipal Code. That's all I have.
Mr. Corman?
For the record, Bart Corman, Lewis and Beatty. This one's pretty much a formality. It's just a final plat. If you remember the preliminary plat we did about 6 months ago or so to divide the lot there at Warrior Avenue and 47 into 3 lots. One of those is a convenience store on the very corner, which you'll see get under construction very, very soon. And so this is the formality to actually create those 3 lots.
Thank you, Mr. Corman. Is there any public comments? Okay, move on to the Oak Acres Villas preliminary plat subdivision 104.
Yeah,
Oh, we do have one. I'm sorry. State your name for the record, ma'am.
My name is Tish Veneman.
Thank you, Ms. Veneman.
I actually live, this is in my backyard. I'm going to get to view it. I've spoken here quite a few times. Kind of tired of it. I'm sure you guys are tired of seeing me.
No, you're fine.
But I don't know, on the final plat, it does not show any lighting restrictions that have been discussed throughout the meetings. I don't know if that should be on the final plat or not, but I do not see that. I don't see any shrubs that we talked about as well, or any sound barriers that were discussed either. I don't feel that we've listened to myself or other individuals who live in this area. And, you know, as I mentioned, I'm tired of being here. You know, I'm sure you're tired of listening to me as well. But I do not see that on the plat. And I want to make sure that's included.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And we're not tired. We like it when the community comes together. We listen.
I don't feel like I'm getting listened to.
Well, that's okay.
So,
It's always
I feel like I'm wasting my time.
okay.
So I really would like to see that on the plat.
Can
and make
you
sure it's
remind us one more time because I remember that you were here and your house is the one, like,
On my deck, I can see exactly where this goes.
Phil Tallo's old house.
over across the fence.
Yes.
Okay.
So actually on my deck, I can see exactly where this goes.
Okay.
And I asked specifically, you know, I was told, oh, it sits lower, right?
Right.
It's 10 foot lower,
Okay.
which really, by the time you build it up, that's nothing. And actually through my back door in my living room, I can see in here as well. So I'm gonna hear everybody's orders in that drive-through, which isn't really peaceful. So I'd like a sound barrier. And I'm sure that subdivision behind there would like it as well. We were going to do that, I believe, with some shrubs, is what we agreed to.
Okay.
I do not see that on the final plat. I don't know, Bart.
We'll address that when we, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get those
And then
answered
we also
tonight.
talked about lighting, because when
Yeah.
that pool was put in specifically, the lighting was awful, and it shined in all those houses on Chantilly Court is the name of that street right there.
Exactly.
And we were gonna put lighting in so that it shined down, which I don't even know how we're gonna light that up for security purposes.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you for your time,
Thank you.
Ms. Vin. All right, anyone else?
Am I correct? Somebody correct me. This is a plat. This just talks about the subdivision of the parcel into 3 individual parcels. And all of the conditions that she is speaking of will be part of the site plan, which was already approved?
Yeah, that is correct.
So even though they're not showing on here, they are on the site plan for the construction?
Correct, yes. And so then there's also a set of construction plans in Mike Cross's office that we're down to 1 storm comment, and actually I got the plans done. I'm just waiting to get it to him for that. So, and those have the shrubs and everything as was required by Planning and Zoning and the Board of Aldermen. So you're right. This is just the survey. This just creates the lines, the easements, and the dedications, and that's all this does. It's not even an engineering document. It's a survey document, and so that hopefully explains the answers why that's not all on here. Because if all that was on here, it'd be a very difficult drawing to follow to where those lines are, because it just have extra stuff that really isn't necessary. That's what the construction plan documents are for and are on.
Thank you, Mr. Corman.
You have an updated timeline?
Last email I saw, the canopy for the fuel canopy was going to be mid to late October, if I remember right. So we're to get started on that. So it's coming pretty soon.
And when we talked about lighting, I mean, I'm just trying to refresh my memory. We talked, how Casey's always shines down and things like that. That's
right.
They took lighting into because I know the people from behind were talking about that too, and I'm sure that was addressed at that time. I just can't remember.
We did. Yeah, we had a lighting plan through this process to make sure that the light stays on the property and doesn't glare excessively across the lines there. So that lighting plan is still in play, and I can make sure that Mike Cross has a copy of that as well on my next
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Corman.
If I may, Chair.
Yes.
Before you leave,
Sure.
We're going to pull up the site plan, and can you specifically, since she feels as though, the citizen feels as though she's not getting her questions answered about it,
Sure.
can you point out on the approved site plan where that barrier buffer that she brought up and addressed with
Sure.
she just questioned about is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't receive, I did not receive, am I supposed to receive a letter about that?
No, not for the site plan, the public hearing on it, for the drawing. So basically, when zoning comes in, it comes in multiple phases. This came in as a rezone, they received the public hearing on. I think they did the site plan at the same time, so they actually probably were combined public hearings. But zoning is a process of layers where you have to zone it, you have to design it, and then this document really is the final splitting of the lot subdivision that goes back to the original subdivision. But we're going to see if we can find that real quick so he can answer your specific questions, showing it that it's on the site plan. Okay? If we can find it, if not, we'll get your information and have him send
No,
it.
not the preliminary, because it went through in February.
It was in February, you are correct.
Yeah, so I think
It
we
was the beginning of
actually,
the month,
we had the public hearing
Yeah,
on
it
that,
February 3rd.
on that, for the site plan. Does that sound right, Bart? You did the
Towards-
zone, subdivision, preliminary
There it is.
plat,
Good.
and the site plan.
Yeah, we did it all together. It went to Board of Aldermen, then came back to Planning and Zoning.
Do you remember if you made
So-
any revisions to your drawing for Board of Aldermen?
From the second Planning and
Towards the
Zoning
bottom.
meeting, I don't believe we did.
See the site plan?
No, we did the first time, and that's why BOA kicked it back to P and Z.
We came back.
Because of the canopy size.
Email to me.
Sure, I can, and anytime you want to stop in by my office, I have plans available to you if you want to look at it on paper. But yeah, we did add,
Exactly, to come all the way through.
try to zoom in and then zoom back out. But there you go.
There you go.
But,
Is this the most updated one?
oh, yeah, sure, I remember, sure. It's got my name on it. I should remember, right? But you can see there along Warrior Avenue, we added quite a few shrubs and trees right there along those parking areas. We also, along the west line, along that drive, and the car wash, we added additional landscape there above and beyond the landscape requirements there. So that's what we did. And like I say, there's a lighting plan done by a lighting specialist on that too.
I saw the lighting plan on there, so.
So
Very good. All right, thank you. That's all right. We'll go ahead and move on.
Could they make a copy of that?
Yeah,
and give it to
they
us?
said, Bart said he would. You had said, Mr. Deach asked if you'd make a copy, if she wanted a copy of that, and she could stop by the office and get that.
I would rather just have it electronic or anything like email.
Yeah, you can give it to, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for everybody. Appreciate that. All right, anyone else at this time for public comments? If not, we'll move on to open up a regular meeting, and first order of business will be our minutes from July the 7th, 2022 meeting. Anybody have any corrections or additions? If not, oh, go ahead.
Just Oak Acres, public comments for Oak Acres.
Preliminary.
Oh, I sure did. Thank you. We'll go back, rewind. Go back to Oak Acres Villas preliminary plat subdivision 104 for the public comments. You want to go
Wolfe
ahead?
Family Trust has submitted an application for a preliminary plat for 1.22 acres on the west side of Warrenton Village Drive, north of Wolf Road. The preliminary plat depicts 2 quadplex, 1 duplex on a single-family lot meeting or exceeding the R3 high-density residential district in the currently zoned C3 highway commercial. The preliminary plat depicts Lot 1A as 16,818 square feet, Lot 1B as 16,671 square feet, and Lot 1C as 10,847 square feet with a 8,940 square foot detention pond on the south side of the development. Sidewalks are included on the proposed preliminary plat. The plan includes an area for installation of mailboxes. Detention pond is proposed on the south side of the development. Staff has reviewed the proposed preliminary plat and found the proposal is consistent with Chapter 410, the subdivision regulation of Warrenton Municipal Code.
So, and you're going to talk, can you just address, I mean, Mr. Wolfe did a great job in, first of all, about what time frame was he talking about when this began type of thing? Was it?
about 20 years ago was when that village.
I remember when,
village was.
you know,
was
I've been on
under
here for
construction.
26 years, and Teresa was on here with me there for a while, in between her and many other accomplished boards that she sat on. And I just have a hard time, like you, refreshing my memory on that if I don't know who the plan is, not calling anybody out, but
Right.
my question is are we all on the same page now between what this needs to be, commercial, residential, or whatever?
Right. As far as the code, when this application was submitted, multifamily was allowed in commercial and in R3. Obviously, that's changing with the PUD, but
Right.
this one was done prior to that, to even knowing about it. So yes, we can do multifamily there through that Appendix A that was current at the time of our submittal.
And he can rent that out.
He can rent that out, yes. As far as I know,
I don't want him to build it.
unless somebody with
I
a
don't want him
higher
to build it
authority
and then
says
come
he
back into
can't.
Mr. Burke and say, why can't I rent this out? So,
Correct. You know, but we cannot divide through the units, but we can only divide for each lot. So there'll be a quadplex on one lot, another quadplex on another lot, and a duplex on a third lot. But we can't divide any further than that with the current codes that are allowed. So that's why. And then you say, well, why do you divide it at all? One, you can build it in phases this way. Two, you can get financing for one quadplex, get that filled, go on, and have permanent finance, and then continue down the line if you so chooses. So
I mean, it seems like a perfect place for this, and the building looked nice, and Mr. Deach is one argument away from needing a place. He's the only one up here that's 62.
Oh, okay.
You're not far behind.
Right. So, yeah, but no, we feel that it fits in really well with the surrounding area up front at the end at Wolf Road, and that's why we're doing a preliminary plat, conditional use, site plan, and then later on down the line we'll do a final plat for a formality and come back later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Is the intention at this point, at least, for all of these structures to be owned and managed by the Wolfe family?
At this moment in time, yeah.
Okay.
Unless something's changed. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Mr. Wolfe. All right. Now can I close it up? All right. Unless there's someone else back there that wants to talk. We'll close our public comments and open up our regular meeting with entertain a motion for our minutes if anybody doesn't have any comments or additions.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as read.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Cooper, second by Mr. Deach to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further questions? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Costello?
Mr. Costello?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Mr. Deach?
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
I want to sound like him. Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest is absent. Mr. Dieneman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Ms. Cheryl Cullum? Yes.
Motion passes. Let's see here. Let's go on to amendment to section 405.255, accessory structures, ADM-123. That's one that we discussed a little bit earlier. Anybody on the board have further questions?
I don't have any questions. I think the requirements are a little restrictive.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're solving for a small area and then penalizing everybody else.
I agree.
Do you have any other input that we can make it better?
Well,
I mean, ideas. We're just throwing out ideas.
sure. No, I know. I just.
Would something like, for the smaller lots, maybe like 10,000 square feet and less would be 50% of the primary structure? Anything over 10,000 square feet would do 30% of the rear yard like it is now? I mean, we could build it however we want. Chris and I had talked a little bit after the conversation a while ago, and we're just looking for a way to make those lots not be able to build such a large accessory structure in the middle of a subdivision. That's what we're going for here. And again, ideas would be.
Go ahead, Mr. Creville.
I feel like John's baited me because he said, are you going to talk tonight? And I said, I'm not going to talk tonight. And here I am talking. And I feel like this was done intentional, so you can blame him for me opening up. Number one, every city struggles with the accessory structure.
Sure.
There's not a standard accessory structure. You know, some have a square footage, some have and it really is dependent on what the need is in the city. As we were discussing this, what I kind of heard from the discussion was there's like a bifurcated problem. 10,000 square foot lot and under, that number, the draft of the number probably makes sense. Of the primary building, 50% of the primary building on a smaller lot doesn't work on a larger lot, okay? So my thought was, do we 10,000 square foot or less, which is our lot minimum, or 12,000 square feet, whatever it is, and you can table this and we can bring it back to you.
Sure.
We can have a lot size under which you can only have 50% of the primary structure, because this is complaint driven. The change is complaint driven where there's residential lots, smaller lots, or in the old part of town that are putting 30% of the yard, and it swells up and it becomes a house at every corner of the lot. So you know, maybe if you can give us a little guidance, if it's something you think would work, where smaller lots under a certain square footage, we have this 50% of the primary building, because they're going to be restricted by setbacks, how big they can build it.
Right.
And anything over, you know, 3/4 of an acre or half acre or point, you know, we're looking at a bunch of different lots on this, and it's really, the larger lots we have in Warrenton are really 0.4 and above, you know, instead of, you know, less than a 1/4 acre lots. Is that something that maybe would work, you know, that for the larger lots have a different measuring stick than the smaller lots? I think from a staff perspective, these guys have really looked at this, and 50% of the primary building on a 10,000, 12,000 square foot lot works really well. That's where the complaints are driven.
Right.
But I don't think it works well for the larger lots.
Right.
Does 30% on a larger lot work, or is there some other measuring stick to make it work?
Well, I appreciate you letting, I think the wise thing to do is table it and discuss it, because I think, you know, one of the complaints that you're hearing all the time anymore is that we're making everything so restrictive, and we're getting in everybody's business on their private property, and we're telling everybody, you know, we're just wanting to do what's best for everybody in the city and make our city more attractive. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I mean,
So
it's
think-
always a balance, and that's
Right.
the hardest thing in planning and zoning is, as much as, we don't want to be, there's these platitudes of, we don't want to be overly intrusive, but
Right.
then you have people that live in single-family residential neighborhoods with 10,000 square foot lots, and you can build a gigantic structure that blocks out the sun of your lot. So
Right.
it's always a balance. So maybe what we can do, if you all want to postpone it, when you're driving around before the next
Okay.
meeting, and give these guys some feedback.
Yeah.
Take a picture, give them an address. Hey, what about this? This seems like a right size, so that we can put it in some metrics and maybe bring back to you this concept of below and above that may work.
I think that's a good idea.
So
Go ahead.
I do have a request. While we do this, I'd like to kind of have a statistics of what is the percentage of, you know, like, let's just say, I don't know, what did you use, 0.4?
Yeah, I mean, that was
Whatever.
just
How
us
many
looking on there.
percent within the area is that covering? And then a breakdown of, you know, other smaller areas. So that would help us kind of give an idea of where the demographics are.
I think that's a great idea. We could take different measuring sticks on a 10,000 square foot lot and say, here's what an accessory structure would look like with the 30% threshold or the 50%. Now that may not be ready for next meeting.
Right.
But I think that's, you know, I'm a visual person, visual learner, so putting that type of presentation together, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, because that'll give us a benchmark.
Yeah.
We just need a benchmark.
Yeah.
And I think people, they just have to respect that, and I've said this many times, that this community is so unique in the situation that we are very old, and we're becoming newer, and when you have, it's hard to put rules in place for old places versus new places. You know, everybody talks about, I hear a lot of times, you know, well, down in Darden Prairie. Well, Darden Prairie wasn't there 10 years ago. It was a field, you know? So they're starting from scratch. And when you're starting from scratch, it's easy to make rules that apply to everybody. But when you're putting it in a community that's 150 years old or whatever, a little different.
It is different, and I want to add something else, because I think just for public consumption is,
Sure.
You all know this, and we don't repeat it enough because we don't get a whole lot of applications, but understand, if you couldn't fit within in this, and you had an unusually shaped lot, then you could apply for a variance to say, hey, my lot's unusual, I want to try to do something a little bit different that could go into the setback. So that's just a general statement to say there is a relief valve from this. It's not so prescriptive that you couldn't do it. You could apply for a variance if,
Right.
you know, you had an unnecessary
In a unique
hardship
situation.
due to lot contour, lot size. You could have an acre lot, but it's long and narrow. You probably need a variance to go back, you know, to build a reasonable structure on that property, so.
Good point.
I just had a couple questions. Number one, if for information for me, I would like to know, without names or anything, give me some examples of current issues that we're trying to address. If a 10,000 square foot lot, as long as they kept within the setbacks, you could build a residence covering the entire portion of the lot, correct?
Yeah.
You could build a home
requirement. We have a rear yard requirement for single-family residential.
You could build
Within those parameters, yes.
Sure.
As big as you can.
You could build a residence, and then you could build an outbuilding with covering 30% of the backyard, and then you could put in an above-ground pool, and then you could put in a gazebo. In other words, you could always fill up your backyard with structure. I just kind of feel like if these are, in subdivisions particularly, there is a way to address it through covenants of within that sect. It seems like we're looking to solve a problem, as Mrs. Cullum said, for a problem that doesn't,
Well, I think we can bring some information back to you all and present it so you guys can make a decision based on some of the information that I think they used to do their analysis on it, and we can bring that back.
Appreciate that.
Do you need a motion?
I would like to ask one other thing if I
Oh, go ahead. I forget you're there, brother. Thanks, Mr. Costello.
That's all right. One of the, and I suppose that where this ordinance currently reads that no structure will be erected in any required front or side yard, effectively that's referring to that nothing can be built in front of the build setback on the front or the setbacks on the side. That has to be within the allowable yard. But my concern or question is, for instance, that 7-acre residence at the end of Lakeview that Mr. Cornell referred to, that home almost backs up to the rear property line. And Mr. Graville's correct, they could ask for a variance since virtually all of their property is in front of the home. If they ever wanted an accessory building, it could not go behind the home. And so if we're going to rework this, it might be worth considering and making sure that it's clear that a detached garage can go in front of the home in certain circumstances as long as it's still behind the front setback.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to, I think, my comment. What I'm reading and receiving is, look, in a 10,000 square foot lot residential neighborhood, yes, we don't want garages in the front. 7 acres, 3 acres, 1 acre, 2 acres, these larger lots, they probably need their own set of rules.
Right.
You know, and that makes a lot of sense because you see a lot of accessory structures in the front of single-family residences in Warrenton on larger lots, right? That's a pretty common occurrence. So whether it's a garage to the side in the front, right? We see that. We've seen those houses come in on larger lots. So I think this is something we can take this feedback and work with it. And, you know, I think we can address, I think that's a good point as well. But I really see this breakdown between that 10,000 single-family residential lot in the subdivision and and there's not a ton of these parcels left in Warrenton in the city limits, right? There's some, but you guys are identifying a couple of them just off the top of your head. And so I don't know that there would be a whole lot of concern of that in the front yard because, you know, there are so few of those that exist. So we can take this feedback and work on it and bring something back.
All right, so we'll need a motion to table this?
Yeah.
Mr.
Motion
Deach?
to postpone, and we'll put it back on the agenda when we're ready to present on it again.
Thanks for everyone's input, Mr. Deach.
I move that we postpone this till another meeting down the road when information will be available.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Mr. Deach, second by Mr. Durbin to postpone this until the information that we need is made available and readdressed. Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum? Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0 with one absent. We'll move on to the Walton project, Site Plan 157. Anybody on the board have a question or comment about that?
I would like to ask.
Mr. Corman, you'll step up.
What is,
Go ahead, Mr. Costello.
I would like to ask, what is a dispatch and general service and repair establishment?
So, yes, okay, so the question was, what is a general service and repair establishment, dispatch and repair? So basically like an electrician, a plumber, an HVAC repairman, something like that, to where they do most of their work at a different location. However, they have their supplies, their inventory, office, and stuff like that at a central location. And that's what we're looking at to do here, is to have lease units for those type of businesses here in Warrenton.
And forgive me if that was discussed during the public hearing. My Wi-Fi crashed briefly, and I might have missed some of that conversation.
Yeah, that's fine.
So.
Yeah, we discussed it, but that's fine. That's no problem with that. Better to know.
Art, are these building, is this going to be one building, or will they be?
It's going to be one building with some steps, okay, because of the terrain. It's going to have a few step downs, but it's going to be one building.
8 suites in one building.
But yeah, 8 units in there.
Okay.
These, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Costello.
The elevation, I know it's not a mini storage, but the elevation that they provided in the materials kind of looks like a mini storage building to me. Is it constructed similar to that? Or is that the intention?
Yeah, I'm not the architect, but yeah, I mean, it's looks like metal siding, one large garage door per bay, and then one man door.
I didn't see the elevations. Oh.
Mr. Deach.
Are you,
One more, Melon. There you go.
Go ahead.
Bart, when you talk about a dispatching, are you talking about dispatching for local businesses, or in other words, if you want work on heating and air conditioning, is this, instead of calling Schreier or whoever, we call this dispatching? Is that the idea, or are they going to dispatch somebody from South Florissant, Missouri, or whatever?
No.
I'm a little confused.
The intent would be.
Just keep talking.
All right. So the intent is for a competitor of Schreier's to have an office there, phone call there. Hey, Schreier's can't get to fix my air conditioner for 3 days. Can you fix it?
Never
today?
happened.
Especially when it's 100 degrees. So and I'm picking on them because there's some great people in there here. So and on a 100-degree day, not always can they be there within 2 hours, but they are very good at their service.
Not pulling that back.
But that's what it would be, is somebody like that. They'd have somebody there in the office to take that phone call, and then they'd have a repair van that would park in there or whatever, and then they'd have their air conditioning unit and their copper pipe and their electrical wire, and they'd zip out to your house and take care of whatever they need to, and then come back there.
So we're really talking about dispatching, let's say, somebody from Wentzville or whatever, not local.
Well, wherever that company's out of.
Somebody would be located there. It would be our surveyor office could do the same thing here, because we have few people in the office and we have other people that go to the site to work. So we would fit in that category of, hey, I need a survey. Okay, we'll work on it in here. We'll send a survey crew out to go to your property, and they'll come back. So that's what it is. That's the definition. I mean, we could pull up from the code the exact definition, but that's the definition that I understand, and that's the market that we're looking at to lease.
So we're not looking at a lot of traffic back and forth, just the third traffic.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to have large amount of foot traffic, customers coming in. And this street's not a high visibility street for retail type situation. It's going to be, hey, come fix my plumbing at my house type thing. So, I mean, somebody would stop in and, you know, every once in a while or pay a bill, but, you know, like our office, I mean, we have very little foot traffic come in, but we do at times, you know, and to pick up their survey or to talk about it face to face. But a lot of times it's over the phone, over the computer, over the internet, and then our crews go to the site.
So I just want to understand that, I just want to make sure I understand what this is. So there would be an office in the building, and then you have, like, you're a service type of industry, basically. And you would have supplies in there, maybe some, I don't know, offices for drafting, whatever. And then if somebody needs whatever, they call the office, and they might be somewhere else and they'll send, but this is kind of like home base.
It's a home base, yep.
Okay, and so if somebody needs supplies, they just go in there, grab it, and then maybe I have a paper that I need to drop as a customer, they have a we have a local home base to drop it at.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's the concept.
Art, one of the things that,
I was going to ask, is this business, is it a single entity?
No, there will
This
be,
dispatch business, or are we talking about potentially 8 different artisan contractors of different disciplines
Yeah, 8 different.
operating their own storefront out of each of these?
correct. That is correct. It would be up to 8 different individuals there, and it is all for lease. So we don't have a contract to fill all these at this time that I'm aware of. It would be out there available for lease.
Art, one of the
I have a
things.
question.
Go ahead,
for,
Scott.
Mr. Burks or
Go ahead.
Mr. Graville. If this is built and businesses operate from there, if at some point this concept is no longer viable, let's just say that tenants don't appear and the building is ultimately somewhat vacant, what other potential occupancies are we opening ourselves up to? Is it restricted to just this type of occupancy? Could these become storage units? Because, my concern is we end up with a building that 5 years from now is operating as mini storage directly across from the ballpark.
Right, very good question. Go ahead, Mr. Graville.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I would have to look and see what storage units are under our code. I don't know, I think they're conditional use, but I'll have to check if they're permitted under the zoning district. I can look that up real quick. But yeah, I mean, it's like any building in Warrenton, and we've seen this happen quite a bit over the last 10 years, where it gets redeveloped. It would have to come in for a change of use site plan, and the use would be looked at that particular time. If you can give me a minute, Commissioner Costello, I'll look that up real quick and see what the...
You go ahead. I think you had a question, Mr. Cornell.
Yep. So, thank you to whoever brought up the elevation. I had missed that when I was reviewing this packet. One of the things that concerns me in the service industry, sometimes the buildings get a little bit worn, wear and tear. I would love to see at least the bottom third of that face be brick to maintain, so that we don't have dented up metal buildings facing out to or onto that street.
I can pass that along.
Is there garage doors on the back side as well as the front side?
No, I don't believe they're planning on doing that at this time, so it'd just be for the front. We have parking in the back. I would imagine over time there would be actually walk doors in the back, just because that's where our surplus parking is. But right now, the elevation that they gave was that. So,
Would what about a condition of no outdoor overnight parking and no outdoor storage of equipment or materials? Would that be objectionable to the?
Well, the situation here is we are actually presenting a site plan with a use that is permitted under the zoning, so we're not at a conditional use stage.
They can add on the site plan conditions.
Oh, they can?
Yeah.
Okay.
The code, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, but any conditional use item would have to come back for conditional use.
Self-storage, and I can this may alleviate some of the concerns. So, for example, pawnbrokers are conditional, seasonal merchants with display of goods are permitted, day merchant with displays of goods are permitted, big box superstore, which it's not, is permitted, mini warehouse or other self-storage units with no outdoor storage, conditional. Mini warehouse or other self-storage units with outdoor storage is not permitted on this. Motor vehicle repair is conditional. Motor vehicle body shop is conditional. Motor vehicle wash is conditional. Gasoline or gas station is permitted. Tire recapping and storage is permitted. So if indoor operations, indoor, outdoor, and loading no hazardous materials or liquids is conditional. So if the uses were to become, if the tenants were identified, these service tenants were, operating in a way that was not permitted, yes, this is a dispatch center, but if the units themselves, the uses become, they may have to come back and get a conditional use if they have an auto mechanic that wants to go in there. They wanted to turn it into self-storage, it would come back and be conditional. You can require no outdoor storage. I don't think the design of this has any concept of an outdoor storage, and if it's a multi-tenant building, I doubt the owner wants any outdoor storage because it looks really nice. But you can add and say no outdoor storage on that. I think that's consistent with the zoning anyway. I don't think they could do outdoor storage anyway unless they came back for additional zoning approvals, but I think you could add that. That's clear in our code that you can add certain conditions on the site plan.
And also no outdoor overnight parking.
You can add those as well if somebody wants to make a motion as part of the approval. And Bart, I think if that's a problem, because do you know who the tenants are yet?
No, we don't have tenants.
We can deal with them as they come in.
Right. I mean, we could do that, or allow some overnight, because if they have a service van that they don't put in there, they would need something like that. But I don't have my client here, so I can't really speak for him on that. But I know we don't have exact tenants either, so it's kind of hard. So the less restrictions, the better. But obviously,
overnight in the front, the back does.
There you go. I think that would be very reasonable.
Be more concerned about up front.
Yeah.
And because my only two concerns about this whole project is the room and how much more traffic by the school. Well, I think the traffic will take care of itself because these businesses are not going to work past whatever.
No.
And I went up there this week and rode around and walked around it, and plenty of room. A lot more room than I thought there was there. When they first started this, I thought, what?
Right.
But I mean, and I think this kind of business kind of fits in right behind that. It's going to make that back of that building a lot more attractive.
Yeah. It kind of covers up that back of the of the old Kroger.
Yes.
So it does help some aesthetics.
Yeah, I think
from
so
a different perspective there.
Well, and you got to look at if somebody's working on stuff and they do happen to park in the back, if they work in the middle of the night, how are you going to tell whether they're just parked there while they're doing a job or?
Yeah, and I think that was a good point that Mr. Cornell brought up too. And I don't say that often about Mr. Cornell. I'm just teasing you. But that I could see, like you said, with the kind of businesses that are going to go in there, dinging the bottom of that and hitting them with their some brick on the bottom portion of that would make it much more attractive to the surrounding area as well. And kind of, as long as they don't paint it brown.
It's consistent with the front.
Right, and it's kind of consistent with the school kind of there too. Well, I think it kind of would blend in there well. So, all right. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Corman? We'll entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the plan as submitted with the conditions of no outdoor overnight parking
in front
the front of the building. No outdoor storage of equipment or materials, and brick front, what's 3 foot? I don't know.
Yeah, just do 3 foot or brick ledge, just brick front ledge.
Brick front, 3 foot across the front.
There you go.
Very good.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Cornell, second by Mr. Cooper, to approve the Walton Project Site Plan 157 with the additions that no outside overnight parking in the front, no outside storage of materials, and I know we've had trouble with that pretty recently here where we've put that in there and they didn't do it, and then so we called them on it and they left. So to each his own, but so I think that's a mark on the city that we've kept our word on that. And then some brick on the front bottom portion to make it look more attractive. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum? Yes. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0 with one absent. Thank you, Bart. We'll move on to the Nerdosh LLC Final Plat Subdivision -102, which we discussed it earlier, kind of a formality that's, and I know Ms. Feeman will give you her email address and you can forward that to her, and we appreciate her comments tonight. So does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Corman at this time?
Are we approving just the breakdown, like how they're segmented?
Yes, that's
Okay, just
basically.
the lines, right?
Yeah,
The
it's just the lines.
Okay.
That's all we're doing tonight.
Okay. I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. All right, if I don't have any questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve Nydorf Final Plat Subdivision 102.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Dieterman, second by Mr. Cooper to approve the Nerdosh LLC Final Plat Subdivision -102 as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum? Yes. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. And all this will come in front of the Board of Aldermen on what date?
I believe August 16th.
August 16th. Next order of business will be the Oak Acres Villas Preliminary Plat Subdivision -104. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Corman at this time on that? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the plats as, how do you want me to put this?
As submitted?
As submitted.
Preliminary plat.
Preliminary, yeah, this is the preliminary plat, yep.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Durbin, second by Mr. Deach to approve the Oak Acres Villas Preliminary Plat Subdivision -104. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum? Yes. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes, motion passes 9-0 with one absent. Next order of business will be the Oak Acres Villas Conditional Use Permit -86. And what's the purpose of the conditional use permit, just to remind us?
Because it's multifamily.
Okay. Just make
Were
sure.
there conditions recommended by city staff on this?
I didn't hear any.
No, there's not really. I mean, we do have to meet the stormwater code.
Right.
So that's one that I know sometimes you guys put on, but it's required of the construction plans and of the subdivision itself in this case. So, but yeah, that'd be about it.
I would make a motion to approve the Oak Acres Villa CUP 86 as submitted.
Second that.
Motion by Mr. Cornell, second by Mr. Cooper to approve the Oak Acres Villas Conditional Use Permit -86. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum? Yes. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. And then we'll move on to the Oak Acres Villas Site Plan -158.
Make a motion to approve the Oak Acres site plan as submitted.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Cornell, second by Mr. Dieterman to accept the Oak Acres Villas Site Plan -158 as submitted. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you for your time there, guys. And Mr. Wolfe, again, thank you for your comments tonight. Let's move on to item number 8, Boulder Valley Plan Unit Development Preliminary, which is PUD-84 that we tabled from our last meeting.
I'd like to ask, you know, at our previous meeting when we tabled and gave some guidance, and a couple of the items, and they were in the minutes tonight. One was that 50% green space would be maintained. The other that we wanted to see no more than 8 units per acre. And it's appearing to me that unless the acreage is different than we thought initially, we should be at about 200 units, and the plan submitted that we're looking at tonight is 250. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why the developer chose to come back at that 250 number rather than closer to the 200 that would be roughly the 8 units per acre.
Correct.
Yeah, somebody's right behind you there.
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted Tim to officially introduce it. Let me start, and then we can do a presentation, then answer those questions as we go along.
Do you need to do that?
To you, sir.
I mean, we've...
Well, number one, I think you're just asking questions. It's in the discussion phase.
Right.
Right.
There was a question asked about this project that's been discussed at 2 prior meetings.
Right.
And I think they have representatives here.
Right.
Mr. Goss and Mr. Corman that can address the question of why they chose the density they chose after the suggestion from planning and zoning at the last meeting.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. You guys have the floor.
Sure. For the record, Bart Corman, Lewis and Beatty, have Brad Goss with me, and the applicant Don Collier III. So I'll talk about a little bit of the revised site plan in general, and then we'll go from there. So we reduced the units, but not to the extent that was discussed in the discussion last month. But we went down to 250 total units. We removed some of those units in the middle of the site and towards the east side there. We added a dog park, a pavilion, a playground, removed a few townhomes, put some apartments on the east against the trailer park to the east. We also added a community garden on the east side there. So we kind of have a corridor of amenities through the middle, as well as we have them scattered out throughout the site. I'll let someone else address the density, but basically we didn't go to that density. Our green space requirement is 49%. It's really close, but I do want to point out that we have a lot more parking than most multifamily housing developments that you'll see, and so for us to get to the 50% and keep the density that we are presenting, we would have to lose that parking, and we think that's probably more valuable than a few square feet of grass is the parking in a lot of situations. And so we're at 49% of excluding the detention lift station out of that. If you include that, we're at 47. So we're really close to half. Is it exactly half? No, but it's very close. And so we thought that was appropriate to keep the units that we're requesting at this time. But, you know, if you look at the 4 different versions of plans, we've added quite a few amenities. We have reduced the number of units, and we are providing plenty of parking. We're also, the buildings themselves have some storage areas in them that was requested early on from staff comments. We've put a lot of green greenery and buffer along 47. We're preserving the cedar row along Hickory Lake. And we're putting a buffer there to the south where the single-family homes are at as well, with some landscaping. So we're meeting quite a few things that are required of a standard multifamily housing, and then we're exceeding them in a lot of those cases. And so that's where we're at. I'll turn it over to Mr. Goss for any other.
Can I ask one question? You
Sure.
were talking about the buffering along Hickory Lick Road and State Highway. What's on the backside between is that I was out there the other day and riding around. That's the trailer court. That's
the
paddock
trailer
field?
park. Yeah, we did not put any buffering there. They don't have any buffering, and so.
Do you not want some there, or? I mean, I'm just.
There may be some. It's just over time, but right now we didn't present any there. And we're a little tight on space there, but that's we didn't have a lot of extra room because I pushed this whole site back from 47 so that we're not right up on top of 47. So that was the trade-off to do so.
You say you push it off of 47 in this revised?
No.
Gotcha.
Way early in the process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Way early in the process when we met with staff, what some of their key things that they were looking for, and one of them was make sure we were buffered along 47 and not right up on 47. And you'll see that most of these buildings are quite a bit off of 47. I have one side building, but it's still about 50 feet off of 47. So we're not right up on the highway. And that space, is green. It's buffer, but then it also kind of offset that to the trailer park. So.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you commented about the parking. I was very impressed with the parking, like especially up in the very top up there where you actually have parking in the middle of the two units too, because that's always a problem with those units is lack of parking.
Right. Yeah. So even on the villa areas, we've got some parking areas just for that Christmas time of visitors or stuff.
Well, I was gonna say, like when I go visit my friends that live in these complexes, you never have a place to park,
Right.
and then you
So-
feel guilty if you take someone's parking spot.
Right. So. Okay.
So you want to introduce your?
Sure. Brad Goss.
Can I ask a question real quick, Brad, before you go? Mr. Corman, have you guys gotten any clarification from MoDOT yet on what they're going to require for access? Because I know that was a question that came up last time.
So MoDOT has approved the location, which is right across from another entrance there. So they've approved basically the location. They've asked for a traffic study on exactly the details of what they're going to approve for an entrance themselves. Due to the cost and the timing of a traffic study, we're waiting for approval here before we proceed with that. But basically, MoDOT has that say, and that's what they've requested. And so we will have to do that to get access or meet enough clarifications not to. But basically, they've asked for the traffic study for that.
Do you anticipate in any of your preliminary discussions, I know you mentioned this before, some type of de-acceleration, acceleration, or turning lane or something?
Yeah, so just in general on this, probably because all the traffic comes from the south and will go back to the south, and a large majority of it, probably the most reasonable solution that'll come back from that study is a decel lane, so that they can turn off of 47 a little faster, which would be an extension of that southern taper there, and probably only about 100 feet, which then would require the storm drainage pipe underneath 47 to probably be extended or modified. So it depends on what that guidance comes, but probably only 100 feet because it's only 250 units. So when you scatter that traffic out over time, it's not a huge thing, but it's enough for MoDOT to ask for the traffic study at this time. Yeah, and we do have the access on Hickory Lick, which is a city street.
So, my name is Brad Goss, and I think Bart did a good job in terms of noting the changes that have been made to the project. But really, when we looked at the comments and tried to meet them, we did take buildings out, and we tried to add we added amenities and spread them out over the entire site, so that that amenity corridor that he talked about, Mr. Corman talked about, really allows for folks who are living in this complex, whether they're in the back of the complex or the front of the complex, it's going to be easy for them to get to the amenities, and we felt that was important. And over time, what's happened with this project from where it started, and I realize you folks don't see where it starts with the staff, and we go through a lot of work with the staff, and we've added with this project from where it started 5 pavilions, additional playground, community garden, 4 fenced dog parks, and a half basketball court. So the amenities have really been responsive, we feel like, to the city. The other thing that we balanced was the parking. We have 90 additional parking spaces over what's required by the city. And we think that's important because, as Mr. Barton, you noted, one of the problems that can happen with these projects is there simply isn't sufficient parking for folks. So that was the balance of some of that trade-off for the green space, because we're at 49%. That's pretty doggone close to 50. And we thought, it's better to have those additional parking spaces than to simply say, okay, we'll just have some additional grass area, which is what would have happened to push it to that. We did also look at the density, and we looked at some other projects in the city. We are zoned R3. We don't have any waste ground in this development, and a project that was recently approved had a significant amount of waste ground, floodway, simply could not be developed on. And when we looked at that project, when we looked at what was really the developable, which is hard for me to say, ground in that project versus our project, we really compare equally. When you look at the active area, they had active green space, our active green space is the same. And so we felt like we were balancing that, and we thought adding the parking spaces was important. So again, and we also think it's important that we are preserving those buffers over on Hickory Lane, all of that, the cedar trees, and also adding the buffer for the residential neighborhood on the other side, on the south part of the project. And then the other thing that we're doing with this project along Highway 47, we didn't just pull it back, we're also landscaping that pretty significantly. So we'll have a nice appearance, and it's being maintained. That's something that the developers proposed. There's a maintenance agreement as part of this project. And so that's going to be the developer's obligation to keep this up and to have it looking good so that it's a project that you're going to feel good about in the city.
And remind me one more time, these will be like leased and rented, and there'll be a staff member on property? And
yeah, that is correct. And there's a leasing office right up front.
Yeah.
So one of the things from the previous meeting, I believe it was Mr. Collier stated that there would be a community building and a meeting facility that would be in the office, but that isn't called out on the plan. It's listed as maintenance and office. So I would certainly want to make sure that there is a dedicated area for the community to meet. And I'm still concerned that that density just I was one of the people that requested consideration of getting closer to 8 or actually a maximum of 8 units per acre while maintaining the 50% green space. And you know what, you're right, 49%, 50%, you got my thumbs up on that. But what's the reduction from the original plan?
We're I think 4 units lower.
4 units lower.
Version from last month.
Really, the trade-off is that we just don't have any waste ground. When you look at the Creekside project, they have 15 acres of waste ground. And when I say waste, I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
Sure.
It's floodway.
Yeah.
They couldn't have done anything on it if they'd wanted to. And so when you look at the developable acreage, they've got 14 acres of what they call usable green space. we basically, we have roughly, we have our green space, and when we compared it, and I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but when you looked at the numbers, that project, they have 9.89 units per acre of what they can use. We did the math on it. When you look at our project, it's 9.8 units per acre. And so that's why we looked at it and we thought, well, this seems fair. It seems like we're getting to work. And I appreciate you'd like us
I'm the one that brought up the usable on Creekside, but they still came in considerably under 9. I think they were in the area of 6.
They're actually at 9.89. We did the math. We took their 6 is the whole thing.
Yeah.
They went and they included that flow area. When we took that out and took their, because I looked
usable.
Yeah, I looked pretty closely at their study today. We spent time on it because I thought this would come up. And it's their usable area. They have 14 acres, and when you do that math, they're actually a little higher than us. And so I appreciated the comment. We did look at carefully, and we thought that we came out comparable to them, honestly. And that's a nice project. It is a nice project. We feel like we match up to it.
So I'd make an observation on that on that point, and it's certainly true they can't develop in a floodplain, but what it does accomplish is it gives a considerable buffer for what would otherwise be a similarly dense development, a considerable buffer for all of the surrounding properties, and I get it. Paddock Fields is already a developed, somewhat densely occupied subdivision, although certainly less dense than this proposed subdivision. But it doesn't change the fact that where this property is situated, this proposed development brings with it some unique characteristics that the density, I think, has the potential to be more of a nuisance to the neighbors than the density on the Creekside project does. And that's the primary reason why I was one of the people that suggested that 8 units per acre was more appropriate. And I'm a little bit mystified because I think we were pretty clear in the direction on that the proposal was basically, let's lop off a 4-unit and throw the thing back there and see if that'll fly.
Oh, and the other thing is comparing this to Creekside. Creekside is I don't know what the term, a rambling. It's spread out. The buildings aren't all condensed. So some of that unusable space is not only buffering between other properties, it's buffering between the buildings. And this is just 250 units on top of each other. Yeah, I had hoped that if we couldn't get down to 200, we would have certainly seen something a little bit different. I believe that it was mentioned, Bart, you weren't here previous, but there was a change. Maybe they would consider, if you couldn't get to 205, maybe you could go 3 units high. Some way to alter, to change what we're looking at here. So
one of the things that we can do is we can add a fence on that back line between us and the and Paddock. We are happy to do that as again something to create some separation there. Paddock is obviously a trailer park. It's dense. That's our neighbor. We can't change the fact we don't have unusable area, but that's something we can do, and we're happy to do it.
I am happier with this setup than as opposed to taking and throwing in 3-story high buildings. I don't agree with, I mean, sure, we can, if we're going to end up with the same amount of people, I do not agree with throwing it on 3-story buildings. I would, even though it would give, more free space, but I think they have enough free space. So just my comment.
Bart, did you have a comment? Or?
Go ahead, Scott. The remark that you don't have unusable space, therefore we're going to develop all of it we can, that's great. Maximizing your opportunity to develop and maximizing your opportunity for income is, is what all businesses seek to do. but I think our guidance was specific. And as I look at this plan, you know, there's really nowhere for kids to go outside, throw a frisbee, throw a ball. If all you had done was in that very central area, taken out 2 12-unit buildings and 2 8-unit buildings, you'd have gotten a lot closer to what we asked for. I'm going to make a motion to table this for reconsideration at such time as the developer returns with a plan that follows the guidelines given at the last meeting.
I would second that motion.
There's a balance here. In terms of the amenities that we've added, we have more amenities than any project in this city. And we have to balance what we're doing. Ultimately, we've made a balance in terms of adding much more amenities, opening up the space. There are playgrounds that we've added to this project for kids, as well as the dog parks. So there are open spaces, as you correctly noted, in this project.
Mr. Barton, I'm gonna point out that the motion on the floor.
Say again?
There is a motion on the floor.
Well, just to clarify the record, and you may not have seen it, Commissioner Costello, but I do think the chair did recognize and give Mr. Goss a chance to speak, so.
You can go ahead and finish before we take a vote.
Okay, thank you. So that's the balance, is that we have tried to balance, we have listened, and, you know, if we're going to have this level of amenities, then to say we're going to cut a number of that many units, the project doesn't work. I mean, the math doesn't work, and I respect that you would like us to do that, but ultimately what we're doing is a project that is consistent with other projects that have been approved and is really compatible with the surrounding area. And we've buffered it, which is what we were asked to do on 47, on the south, on the north, and we're also willing to add a buffer on the east as well, if the commission so chooses.
Thank you.
To indicate that you can't eliminate units because of the amenities that have been upgraded. While there are additional amenities, they don't require a great deal of capital. It is dedicating space, but we're talking about a fenced dog park, I'm assuming a fenced dog park, a community garden was added, there is an additional playground. So it's not as if, again, we had a discussion last time, and I think we as a group came off of the pool recommendation. Mr. Collier said that there are some cost issues, but this isn't a cost issue, the amenities that were added. Not to the point where you couldn't have reduced some of the units. So.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we do have a motion to table this, but we will open, before we take a motion, we'll ask anybody on the board if they have a discussion, questions or comments before we take the roll call vote.
Can we repeat what was talked from last time? What was the requirements that was agreed upon, or what we? I tried to find it.
It's in the minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't. Just so for the record.
Sure. Recreation space have a central location. MoDOT recommendations on Highway 47 for a turn lane or acceleration lane. Main overall green space of 50%. The Planning and Zoning Commission would like to see the proposed changes before submitting project to the Board of Aldermen. I missed the...
It's up top.
Yep.
Number 6, right?
Yep, no more than 8 units per acre. Thank you.
So I just want to remind, as these PUDs are new to us, this is what happens with the PUD. It is a negotiation. So I want to make sure that it's clear that, you know, we're not legislating a requirement right here, that, you know, it's a feedback. That's the way this process is supposed to work, is to say, hey, this is what we'd like to see, here's what we come back with, this is what we think we can do. So it it's not, that's what's different about a PUD, so I just want to make sure that, make sure that it wasn't we agreed to these conditions. I
Right.
want to make sure that's clear. You all can do whatever you want with regards to conditions, what your expectations are, what you want to see before you vote and whatnot, but I just, in fairness to the property owner, I think it's important to stress that
That's why I
they're
don't-
allowed to come back and say, this, we went back to the drawing board and this is what we're bringing back. Sure.
And they did come back with some concessions. I know that they did. I don't know if tabling is the best thing to do. I respect Mr. Costello, Mr. Cornell's comments on that. But if it goes, whatever happens tonight, if it goes to the Board of Aldermen, then it's their call to make the final decision, correct?
Does it go to them if we table it?
No.
No.
I'm saying if we don't table it. Because I don't think it's time to table it, but we're going to go ahead and vote on that motion. I'm just asking anybody else if they have any comments or questions about your motion.
Well, I can explain the logic of tabling is, we could instead make a motion to approve with conditions and send that to the Board of Aldermen, and the Board of Aldermen could accept those conditions, or they could add more, or they could strip them out. If we table it and show some backbone that reducing the density is the crucial point, then that gives the opportunity that they truly come back with a modified plan that reduces the density down closer to 200 units, at which point we don't even have to add that condition. It goes to the Board of Aldermen as a development with 200 units instead of 250. So my logic on the tabling is not to, not to stall them or anything like that. It's simply to have them come back with something that is representative of what we voted 10-0 last meeting to ask for.
Well, I'm on the, we've already tabled this twice, and I think we'd be better off sending it with our conditions to the alderman as opposed to tabling it again.
I agree. I think if they will have to approve it anyway. They will have to get another round of approval, and they have the final say.
There's a motion on the floor.
So I guess at this point, we'll take a roll call vote on that on the motion that's on the table, and that's to table it. So I guess at this time, if there's no more discussion, we'll take a vote on that.
So you ready?
Yep.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum?
No.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
No.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
No.
Mr. Barton?
No.
Mr. Durbin?
No.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Mr. Dieterman?
No.
Motion fails 2 yeses to 7 noes, which will bring us back to our next step.
I would like to make a motion to approve the plan as submitted with the following conditions. All streets and parking areas internal to the site shall be private. Prior to construction, submit a stormwater management plan. Prior to building permits, submit details of the trash enclosure to verify compliance with the city code. Prior to construction, submit the required parks and open space contribution. Submit a plan to maintain the property. Recreation space have a central location. The MoDOT recommendations on Highway 47 for a turn lane or acceleration. Maintain overall green space of 49%. And a maximum density of 8 units per acre while maintaining that 49% green space.
Second.
I'll second that.
So you write all that down.
Oh, it's right there in front of us. I
Okay.
mean, we got it. They got it. It's right there in front of me. He just basically read from the last meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
He's just leaving the 8 units per acre in there, but we send this to the Board of Aldermen, they could say that, they could even say no 8 acres, they could go to what he's presented tonight, correct? See what I'm saying? So we send our message that, hey, we would respectfully like that, but maybe they have different feelings on that, because everything is, that's the hang up on this. Everybody knows that. So at least we send it forward. Because again, I know I respect that, and we don't want to waste people's time, but we also want to do what's right for the city. That's ultimately this board's job, and we respect that, and we respect you guys too. So we have a motion on the floor, as you heard from Mr. Cornell, second by Mr. Costello, and I'm not going to read that all again because it's on the board right there in front of me. It's basically read exactly as stated in the last meeting.
It was Cheryl that did the second, I believe.
Okay, so I heard her and it's got to take that, so we'll give it to Cheryl. Cheryl seconded it. So we have a motion by Mr. Cornell, second by Mrs. Cullum to approve, to send this on to the Board of Aldermen to approve this with the changes that were made and with all the things that were talked about at that juncture, okay? And basically the main one was the 8 units, so that'll be where the board's going to be focused on. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Cheryl Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Cullum?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Dieterman?
Yes.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0, now to come from the Board of Aldermen on August 16th. And thank you for your time and for your patience, and good job. At this time, we're going to close the official meeting and turn it over to Mr. Burks for any comments.
We'll have a meeting next month. We have 2 items on the agenda.
2 items on the agenda already. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the group? If not, I do. I think this is Mr. Deitch's last evening on the board, and we want to thank him officially from all he's done for the city community. I've been here since 1989. He was my first boss here. When I moved here in 1989, I was a mere lad at the age of 23. But he has been a very important figure in my life, and I've been proud, and it's been a pleasure to serve on this board with Mr. Deitch. And so I thank you for your service, and you are going to be missed because the jokes won't be as funny. Because so to celebrate next time, he's been asking for dinner. We might have dinner next time.
So next time, the next meeting, will it just go all night without him here to motion to adjourn?
It might.
Should we pack a sleeping bag?
So
No.
we are going to, one more time, we're going to ask Mr. Deitch to do his due diligence here and dismiss us.
And the $5 will be coming to you when we leave. So moved.
Make a motion to...
The motion is to close the meeting for tonight.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Deitch, second by Mr. Durbin to adjourn for the night. Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Good night. Have a good